Hey everybody, I'm Doug, and today I'm going to make a DIY road case. So over the past couple years, I've started to amass a few pieces of field audio gear, and I recently picked up the Zoom H6, and it's a really cool little device, but it was basically the breaking point for what I can fit in my camera bag. I just don't need all the audio equipment every time I want to take a few pictures or do something small, and things just tend to get banged around in any kind of bag if there aren't specific nooks and crannies for them to go and fit into. I thought about a road case that you would buy online, but I really don't need anything super durable or even watertight for that matter. I just needed some kind of case to put things in. Plus, those road cases, like Pelican and everything else, they tend to be expensive and, they're worth the money for what they do, but it's overkill for what I need. So I happened to think about this old case that I had from a drill that I purchased a number of years back. It's been sitting in my basement ever since I bought it. The drill still works fine, but I'm never going to use this case that it came in, so I decided it was time to do some surgery and start hacking away at the little pieces of plastic inside that were meant to support the drill and the charger and everything else. So I started out with a knife, but some of the pieces were pretty thick, and I eventually remembered that I was given a Dremel tool for Christmas like 2 years ago, and I'd never used it. So I put the little cutoff wheel on there and I went to town, but obviously the battery had never been charged since I first got the tool, and so that didn't last very long. So finally I decided to get out the big guns and pull out the angle grinder, which is probably overkill, but it did make pretty quick work of things. The downside of that was that it created a lot of plastic splatter and dust, I guess, for lack of a better word, and that kind of got all over the inside. So I had to sweep it out and wipe it out a little bit before I wanted to move on. So once I got the inner tabs pretty much removed, I moved on to the foam. I took an overhead picture of the inside of the case with a tape measure in the frame for reference, and then I traced that in Illustrator and started to mark out some of the references for where some of the items might go. Then I printed the whole thing out using Acrobat and used the poster setting so I could print it on a few pieces of paper at the same time. Now, most people recommend using a foam called Kaizen foam for any kind of situation where you're making like a tool organizer or, fitting tools in something like this, but it is actually fairly expensive. And for my needs, I thought, I'm going to see what else I can find. And so I ended up looking online and I got a few of these floor mats. Now, Harbor Freight sells something similar for like under $10, but for me, it's not worth the gas money to drive to a Harbor Freight when there's a Walmart close by, so I paid about $15 for these. So here I'm just stacking them up to see how well they're going to fit in the case. So I glued them together, not really knowing what to expect in terms of how well they would stick together with spray adhesive. The one side is a little glossier and it's got this diamond plate pattern on there, and I thought about sanding it off, but I didn't really know if I needed to do that. I just needed the foam to be stacked for the purposes of padding. It doesn't really need to look beautiful. And in the end, the fact that I could still pull the mats apart actually worked out well. After that, I just had to cut it out and see how it fit. And I did have to adjust this a couple times. It seems like the actual scale that I had mocked up didn't translate perfectly, but after messing with it a little bit, I did get to a pretty decent point. Once I had the template, I traced it out on the foam and decided to use the bandsaw for most of the heavy lifting since I have it. Eventually, I used a combination of the bandsaw and a utility knife to do most of the cutting. I did a few tests and I was able to get everything fitting pretty nicely as far as the overall foam inside the case, top and bottom. But then it was on to actually cutting out the holes, and this was by far the most tedious part. If I had to do it over again, a better, thicker foam would have definitely been much easier to work with and slice, but with a little persistence, it all started to work out. Apparently I didn't measure accurately because it took me a bit of trial and error to get some of the items to fit perfectly. I decided to apply some heat and try to clean up some of the little foam pieces that were sticking out from the cuts I made, but in hindsight, that was a mistake that I would have just skipped. But hey, you live and learn. Eventually, I decided to use a little bit of hot glue to really make sure that all the layers were sticking together well. In the end, I'm not really concerned about how it looks. I really just wanted the stuff to be protected and not be rattling around in my camera bag. So now I have a dedicated case for this equipment, and I actually have room to add more items on the top side of the case, although I have to think about things there so that, any equipment I do put there doesn't bang against the items that are on the bottom half. But I'm sure I can figure something out for that when the time comes. But for now, for the effort that I put into it, I'm pretty pleased with the overall result. Hopefully this inspires you to save an old case that you have laying around. Now that I've got this one done, I started to think about some of the other old drills and handheld tools that I've seen at thrift stores and flea markets, some of which you can buy for a couple bucks. And honestly, the case might be more valuable than the tool if it's decently made and if you can adapt it to your needs like this. So I'll definitely be keeping my eyes open in the future for other cases like this. Alright, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.